Happy ATC Day to one and all. Not only are the 2023 ATC projections debuting today, but we've also got a draft prep pod for you as well. It's our catcher preview show. We'll go through the catcher bargains as per the ATC projections with NFBC guru Vlad Sedler of FTN Fantasy next on Beat the Shift. And welcome to another episode of the Beat the Shift podcast. I am your host, Ariel Cohen, and with me as always is Ruvain Guy. How are you, Ruvain?
I'm doing great. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm so glad we are up to draft season prep. And what better guest to have than Vlad Sedler. Welcome to the show, Vlad Sedler from FTN Fantasy, NFBC Pro. What's going on, Vlad? How are you?
Gentlemen, great to talk to you on this fine Tuesday in January. It's just still so far away from the regular season, from opening day, but I know we are all at full speed currently.
Oh, absolutely. Yep. ATC projections are in motion. By the time that this podcast gets out, you might see it up or shortly thereafter. So tomorrow, actually today, when you hear this, ATC Day. Moved it up a day earlier, Wednesday, January 18th, ATC Day. Hope you enjoyed the day. Enjoy the ATC projections. But I know, Vlad, you do your own projections, the VDP projections. First of all, most importantly, what does it stand for?
It stands for Vlad's draft positions. It could be Vlad's draft projections. It actually is both. Originally, Vlad's draft positions are a ranking system that is a good way to basically identify market inefficiencies against the NFBC's ADP, and then people can use it for their leagues that are non-NFBC. But that's what I've done over the years. Pre-content, before I used to produce content, I would do it for myself. Now I share it with the world. And this is the projections are the extension of that, the actual math behind it, which I show with essentially like an auction value for a 15-team mix, like a VDP value, like a dollar value per player, and that's what the projections are. So they just came out Monday. So we're in day 2 in this.
And definitely log on to FTN Fantasy. Great site. I can tell you there's projections, there's articles. Going to be a podcast as well this year again, right?
Yeah, we'll be back. Myself and Matthew Davis. We're going to get back into the swing of things starting next week. And yeah, I mean, it's just always so much better when you can talk about it, right? Because I've been, I feel very much in tune with fantasy baseball, even though it's middle of January. I think I'm on like my 7th draft champions. I've done a few gladiators, full set of projections, rankings, everything. But there's really nothing like being able to talk about it with your friends, right? Like when you and I went and met in First Pitch, Arizona.
Absolutely.
There's just nothing like that. It really kind of gets gets the bones going.
So how is your VDP created? This is you manually going through players and it's Vlad's insights through and through, or are you doing some kind of formulaic stuff? How does it work?
Yeah, there's a formulaic part, but it starts off from scratch, really, like sort of like a fresh batch of pasta. I guess that you're making every year, but basically just starts out like a blank Google Doc. I just go team by team. First, start with the offenses, then I go through the pitchers. Usually, it takes me about a month to get through it, to do it right. But basically, what I do is I dig into each player, kind of review. We all kind of know the 5x5 stats. A lot of us, like in our heads, like what we think they should be or what they have been recently. There's obviously some things that we remember along the way as we're doing it, but I really go into each player, looking at everything, on the hitter side from plate discipline, all rate stats, all underlying power metrics, speed data, looking at their injury history. I'm basically layering in there some team and lineup context, like where they might be hitting in the lineup, ballpark factors, and then I kind of do the same thing with the pitchers. And then after that, I kind of do a very serious spot check because I am, and you can ask the guys, my text chain of friends. Rob Silver, Scott Jensen, Matt Modica, they always make fun of me over the years of my projections, just certain guys that I love that I just have really high. And so, over the years, I've just kind of become a little bit more conservative. I've learned a lot from people like yourself and others that have been in sort of the baseball projections business. And to make it right, make it realistic, there definitely are players that essentially like pop out in my system, but they all fit into what a general expectation might be within a season. For example, the plate appearances on the hitters on the team are going to be between 5,900 and 6,100 plate appearances, right? Making sure that the roto categories make sense as far as totals go, that the runs aren't extreme and they fall within range of realistic outcomes. And of course, obviously, my Braves runs are going to be more than my Pirates runs collectively. Same thing, just triple checking on the pitching side, making sure this is something that was fun. I was just doing the other week was just making sure that I have a realistic total on the wins and looking back and seeing what percentage of wins came out of bullpens versus starters for all the teams and making some projections on that end for the future season. So it's really fun. I mean, there's really nothing like it. So I absolutely love it. But the main purpose of it, really, it's essentially a tool for folks, subscribers, to sort of recognize market inefficiencies that are currently out there, right? And if NFBC, you've got drafters who have been drafting now, for the last couple of months, setting the market. And for me, this is like my view on the market. Like if I was to set ADP, like this is what it would be. And so then people can go look at each player and decide, yeah, that makes sense. Yes, this doesn't. Yes, this is a sparkling value. Yes, this guy's overpriced, and kind of going from there and taking it in that respect.
Yeah, and you come up with the VDP dollar, which you have what the dollar is worth for the player, and obviously if it's bigger than the market, it's the guy that you're going to want. If it's very much bigger than the market, it's the guy you're really going to want or get a lot of shares of, and of course the opposite. If it's much lower, it's stay away from, of course. How do you come up with the price on each player? Do you take the statistics and you run like an auction calculator type thing on it?
Exactly. It's I have a friend that I've been working with for many years who used to play CDM in the early 2000s. Russ Prentice. He's worked with me at FTN. We've drafted teams at NFBC together. He's really formula spreadsheet master. Does it for a living in doing construction costing. But he's helped me a lot with developing some of the formulas and some of the adjustments. A little bit of a secret sauce. Like we all have to have a little bit of secret sauce in there. But certain adjustments made for for catchers and everything. But at the end of the day, there's a got the human element, which I think is important and is what kind of makes mine a little different. And then of course I look at yours afterwards and Steamer, and I do like to compare. But what I'm not doing really exactly is trying to like win a projections competition, right? Like I think, like I'm, I go up against, yours or Steamers or the bat because I am sort of over projecting a lot of times on the playing time. Like I'm assuming full health on almost everyone. I mean, of course I have adjustments on the regulars like Buxton, Trout, and guys like that. But for the most part, I'm, I have a sort of a higher game total per player. And I haven't yet really factored in like the bottom end guys, the guys that are going to get maybe 20 to 80 plate appearances who aren't really even on the team yet. Those guys haven't been really included into the formula quite yet.
Yeah. So you're using your projection tools. Basically, it's a fantasy baseball system that you're basically using it to signal whether you have a buy or you have a pass signal. Should you buy the player or not? It's not a baseball system. It's a fantasy first system. Yeah. And yeah, definitely. That's the way ATC was originally, but I rounded it out, and now it's just a full-fledged system as well. Since it's on Fangraphs and all that, it's sort of, get compared to the baseball aspect too. So I got to make it accurate for that as well. But I totally agree with the buy and pass method. That's really the way it works.
And when we were talking, you actually nailed it exactly. You explained it perfectly, exactly like my purpose of it and what I want to do with it. But right. I do want to mention, like, I love with your model the risk factors involved and the blanket on the name of the code. I just had it in my head, but the
inter-standard deviation and inter-skew. Yeah.
It.
So I know I haven't thrown it to Ruvain in a little while. Sorry,
it's okay.
Ruvain.
This is your guys' area of expertise. I'm not going to step on your toes or anything. I have my own expertise, and that's why working as a team, you have yours, I have mine, and that's why we work well together.
Yeah. So, but I did want to ask you, Vlad. How do you incorporate risk into your thing? Because generally when you put the projections, any projections, into an auction calculator, it's going to give you an expected total. Doesn't really contemplate risk in there. Now, if you have a guy projected for fewer plate appearances because you think he has a health risk, that's okay, you're doing that, but it's still giving you an expected number. How do you incorporate, or do you even incorporate risk into how you draft and in terms of your auction valuation?
It's the best way to put it is I do not recommend people draft off auction values directly and off a list, because obviously everybody knows that roster construction is a big part of it. Knowing position scarcity, category scarcity, all of that is important. So this is one part of the tool that goes along with the content and with my draft rankings. If you're doing just regular snake draft, as the weeks unfold here through the rest of January through February, we'll be sort of diving into each position by tiers and identifying some of those players, basically highlighting players that are are more guys that would be higher in your risk model, and lower. And so those are things that I'll be pointing out throughout the season as we run through each the tiers of each position, and of course kind of understanding how to address it with balance as you draft, right? Because as we all know, even the sort of the misunderstanding that like, oh, I'm going for the overall, I just need to draft a whole bunch of high upside guys is not the way to go. I think we all know that. But to answer your question, yeah, it's not built into the model per se, other than some just plate appearance and raw data adjustments. But it's something that goes hand in hand with the content.
Yeah, so with ATC, the nice thing about ATC is that since it looks at many underlying projections, each projection system underlying has a different thought as to what the true talent is of a player. And ATC is the average of them. What's good about ATC is that not only do I provide the expected numbers, but I give you the flavor of how different the projections are from one another over the average or under the average. And is there any skew? Are there more of them that are up and one that's dragging the average down, or so on and so forth? And those two figures are the inter-standard deviation and the inter-skew. Standard deviation is a measure of how different are they, and skew is, whether it's more up or down. In general, I've found that if you have a high standard deviation of a player, it's more risky. You should probably want a bigger discount to roster them on your team. And in terms of skew, negative skew is better because the wisdom of the crowd is really up. It's just one projection that's bringing down the average, so negative is better, and so on and so forth. Let's go to Ruvain on this first. In terms of building your team with risk, do you think that there should be a limit of total risk on your roster? Like, don't take DeGrom is going to be risky. Byron Buxton is risky. Don't take all the risky guys on a team. Or are you just avoid certain players, but you're okay with taking as much risk as you can, provided you keep getting good bargains? Is there a limit or not for you?
I think there has to be a limit, only because there is no crystal ball in knowing how players react to them during the course of the season and injury. You mentioned Jacob deGrom. Last year, we had a ton of shares of Jacob deGrom. Why? Because according to our models and according to the pricing, we were getting him at a good price. And then a lot of other players who are injury prone, quote unquote, had great prices also. So we were thinking, oh, let's do this, let's do that. But because we had so much money invested early on in the draft, you have to try to balance it out, because if you try to be risky up top, you can't really be that risky at the end, because you need to get stats in the end. You need that base to create your team so you can compete throughout the entire year. If your risk is up top and that person and that player doesn't come through, and the bottom players are risky also, then your season is hanging on by a thread. So I think there is a limit as to how much risk you can take on. However, there are safer risks and there are non-safe risks. Like a safe risk is a player that you think is not going to get a lot of playing time, but maybe their playing time will go up. One of the non-safe risks is a player who's coming into the season injured, and you don't know when they're going to come back. Like, where are you going to draft Bryce Harper this year? Is Bryce Harper going to come back in May, June, July, August? When is he going to be coming back? How much are you going to pay for him? And how much risk you want to take? Do you want to take him earlier or do you want to take him later?
Vlad, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think I'm in lockstep with that thought, and definitely as far as taking those risks more so in the middle and later rounds, and making sure you're cognizant of what risks you have taken up until that point in the draft. So if you have a fairly safe draft and you do feel a little shy on steals, and you grab a Mondesi later, obviously you don't want to have all your eggs, stolen bases in that basket. But you can take some shots on players that are going to be fungible anyways, most likely players after round 15 that a good percentage of those guys are going to end up dropping anyways. I know my pre-content days, before basically all of my information was out there and basically essentially people had my cheat sheet, I was less risk averse. And I did have a lot of success in NFBC and other formats, but I think I was also, well, first of all, I was grinding a lot and working hard on the waiver wire, but I was also really lucky, and also a lot of churn and burn, a lot of turnover, where you sometimes are able to hit on the right players that help you. You just pick up the right guy at the right time. So I was able to sort of mitigate some of that risk. The older I get, and the more I learn from smart players around me in the NFBC community, people that are winning. Even my good friend Scott Jensen, who I mentioned earlier in the show, who isn't, we'll always drive back from Las Vegas, back to Los Angeles on our way back, and I'll always look at that team of his that he drafted in the main event, and I'll say, man, that is so boring. That is just it's just not my kind of team, not my cup of tea. Yet every year he's either winning his league or he's finishing near the top of the overall, and after a while, it just something starts to sink in with you, and so. I just kind of recognized I'm taking my shots on risky players a little bit later in the draft. I think one good example of that last year was my two big risks that I was willing to take were Cody Bellinger, and this was after he had fallen from an ADP of around 90 to the 160 range. That was a shot I was more willing to take. And then a Brandon Belt, who was going around 250 ADP at the time. That was a shot that I was willing to take as well. Somebody with a very strong injury history, and so I'm much more likely to do that than say like a Buxton early on. But if I do take a Buxton, then I'm going to be careful. I don't want to have like a Buxton, Tatis, Mondesi, team, because you're not winning, you're not cashing, you're not getting extra money for style points for posting a pretty team on Twitter message board.
Yeah. I mean, I'm of the opinion that it's okay to take on a lot of risk on your team as long as you get appropriate discounts. And when I do pricing, I have pricing as risk adjusted. So Freddie Freeman, let's say without adjusting for risk, he's $31 in the model, but with adjustment for risk, he's actually $33 because he's super safe. Or Mondesi is $20, but with a risk adjustment, might be $15. I'm okay with taking more than one. As long as you're getting the discounts. The only thing I'd add to that I sort of see is that you can keep piling on in the aggregate on your team, but the discount actually has to be more. It's okay to have one guy at the proper risk discount, but to risk buy three players, let's say you want to buy three players who are more risky, you actually need a bigger discount. If it's a $5 discount that you need on three players, it's not just, okay, 5 on this guy, 5 on that guy, 5 on that guy. It's 5 on the first, maybe 6 on the next, maybe 8 on the next. You need to be able to compensate by getting a bigger discount if the player is risky. Now, in general, we took a lot of Jacob deGrom last year, and that's because the price was just unbelievable for what we thought he was worth. But in general, when I draft my teams, it's pretty risk averse. And that's because we usually don't find that there are a lot of discounts in the market. But I guess last year, people that we play with smart people, and they were like, we're not touching deGrom, and that's why his price fell to us. But in general, I find that, I'm okay with it taking risk, but I end up not taking on the risk. I end up being more risk averse. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, absolutely. It really does. I know we had a similar discussion last year, and I do like the way that you're very formulaic about it. And I think it ends up working itself out in the results and how things are going. Of course, I mean, hey, at least you weren't wrong place, wrong time in the first weekend of main event drafts when Jacob deGrom, right before the injury, was going first overall in $1,700 entry leagues.
We had him one year when he got injured in spring training. We drafted him that day, and he got hurt. The news came out that afternoon.
And we bought him for $13 in an auction championship. That's not first round value. That's ninth, eighth, ninth, whatever it is. So, I mean, risk adjusted pricing was way higher than that. We thought it was a steal even at that price. But the problem is that we did it a lot, right? We did it in 3 different leagues or 4 different leagues.
Too many
at
shares.
At a certain point, it wasn't just too many shares. I guess we just needed more of a discount to roster in our second league and our third league, and so on and so forth. Anyways, I do want to do some more strategy, and since it's our first podcast of the year, we do want to talk a bit about the player pool in general. We're going to be talking catchers today. I should have said that at the top of the show. It's our catcher episode to level the field. But before we do that, I do want to get your take on closers in general, Vlad. What I'm seeing in early NFBC drafts is that Edwin Diaz, Emmanuel Clase, they're being selected in the early second round. I've never seen it that early. I don't want to just say whether that makes sense or not, but could you actually give me the case for and case against why that's a good idea and why that's maybe a bad idea?
We were actually seeing it last year a little bit too. Maybe not quite as high, but we did see some in the NFBC market last year at sort of at the end of early second round. We saw, who was it at the time, Josh Hader and Liam Hendricks going around there, and mostly towards the end of the second round. But it started that way because the format was draft champions, 50-round draft and holds in NFBC, where there at the time, this time last year, last December, last January, there was even less clarity as far as who the closers were. It was a very small list of elite guys, and if you remember, even Chapman was on that list, and so there was a big push by the people drafting volume, drafting a lot of draft champions to make sure that you were securing those saves. And of course, it ended up working out if you got the right players. Even to some degree, Josh Hader worked out, even though he absolutely blew up the ratios at the end of the season there when he came to the Padres. He kind of still racked up the saves. So what happens is I think there's somewhat of a hangover from the draft champions into the 12-team OCs and the 15-team main events, where there becomes this thing, if people aren't comfortable with the market and they're unwilling to take their shots later, then they don't mind sort of investing in those top guys. Now, for me, I also don't want to spend a lot in fab. Like when I do get into the 12-team OCs and the 15 main events, I would like an early I would like a good closer, but at the right price, for my RP1. So I'm never going to push up for myself. If I have the 15th pick of a 15-team draft, I'm probably not going to take a Diaz or a Clase there. I'd rather map out my first 5-6 rounds and sort of figure out where that first guy is going to be for me. Like if I like Devin Williams or Ryan Helsley or Jordan Romano, where am I going to pick my closer at, and where would I be able to grab him? So that's how I kind of want to map it out. But it is a little different with the 50-round draft and holds that the majority of folks are drafting right now, as opposed to in March when we get to draft season with Fab, where we can pick up saves on the waiver wire and might come at a premium at some point, spending a lot of money on Fab. But yeah, that's the balance. So I can see it both ways. For me, I'm never one extreme or another. I'm very anti. That's the one thing I'm anti is anti-extreme drafting. I will never go into a draft or any year with an extreme strategy with any category or any position or any stat.
Right. All right, Ruvain, how about you? What are some of the other cases for and cases against doing that? You're a very against guy, I know, but can you make the case for and against?
Yeah, I'm very against it, but there are reasons for it. I mean, these guys, like Edwin Diaz and Emmanuel Clase, they're going to give you strikeouts as almost as much as a third or fourth starter. They're guaranteed jobs. They're on good teams. There's stability there, and there's no injury history there. So for all those reasons, those guys seem pretty quote-unquote safe. But you're leaving so much value on the table for other offensive players. How many if you're getting them in the second round, you're not picking a second round hitter, which you can't get in the later rounds. A closer you can get later. So it's like going after like we used to for Mondesi and even Billy Hamilton. We used to push them up and draft them sooner just because of that one category. Remember, closers are not only not getting saves all the time. There's a lot of closers by committee. They're being pitched in the period in the time of the game when the manager wants them to. So they may not even close. Edwin Diaz pitched in the eighth inning a couple times and he didn't even come out for the ninth sometimes. So you're not guaranteed that you're going to get the saves from them. I just don't like leaving so much value on the table. If you're getting a second round player, I want a second round value. You're not going to get a second round value if you pick Edwin Diaz in the second round.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the reason for is that the saves are so scarce. There's not a lot of lockdown closers, and the super elite ones they get it. You don't have to worry about saves anymore. You don't have to use your fab. I think the biggest reason from my mathematical standpoint is if you want saves on your team and you look at the pricing for closers, the round and the auction price that they actually go for in the market is so much higher than what if you run an auction calculator it's worth. Like Edwin Diaz, if you run an auction calculator, might be worth $20. But if you're picking him in the beginning of the second round, that's like a $30 pick. That's a $10 overpay. But that's not just true on top. It's true in the middle. If you're paying for a seventh round closer who maybe your model says is only worth 14, you're still paying 20-something dollars. If you're in the fifth round or so for it, you're overpaying anywhere on the curve. So there's I always bring the concept of the market premium. There's always a market premium on closers. The question is, where is the market premium the best? And if you believe that, okay, well, these guys are so much more valuable than I'm really overpaying in the middle. They're so valuable. I'm not overpaying that much, even though it seems ridiculous in the second round. Then that's an argument is that it's the least market premium. There's also opportunity costs. Case for or against. If you think that you can, If you're taking a closer in the second round, it means you're not taking somebody else. You're not taking a top pitcher. You're not taking a top hitter. If you think that the drop between whoever you're going to get your closer next, that difference is not as great as the difference in the hitters, well, then that's who you should take. The drafts are hard to me to gauge these market premiums and opportunity costs because you don't know what's ahead of you. You have to pick, and you don't know how far down some of the closers would drop. Like if you had a menu and you said, okay, I can wait until the 9th or 10th, then you have a better plan. But who knows? There could be a closer run in the 7th. It's much, much, much harder, and that's why people sort of do more and say, okay, I got to really push it up to the second. To me, the answer is that every draft's different. It also depends on where you're picking from in terms of a draft. I find myself not wanting to draft closers so high in drafts because I think the market premium is way too much for those super elite in the second round. But in auctions, they don't get pushed up as much because of the dynamic of auction, because you can buy someone at any time. I think that the super elite ones are actually worth it because you're not paying $30 in an auction. You're paying more like $23, and for that kind of value, you're only overpaying by 3, but you might be overpaying by 6 or 7 in the middle. So I find myself taking better closers in auctions and not in drafts. Make sense?
Yeah, it does, and it's I think the mapping out strategy is also wise, and it could work well if in NFBC we have a KDS system, right? You set your KDS before you go into the draft. At least usually half an hour before where you're drafting from. And if you sort of lay out your targets of what your ideal team would look like, or even secondary, tertiary, for those first 6 rounds, you can almost plan it out, who your targets might be. Like maybe you're in a position in the 4th round where you're most likely going to have a choice between a Ryan Helsley, a Kenley Jansen, Felix Bautista. If you're comfortable with those guys, then you can sort of target them there. Of course, as we're looking at the market this year, it really starts to get a little scary after, say, pick 100 or so, right? So in 15 teamers, that's like after the 6th round. It's after that little area of Clay Holmes, Scott Barlow, and Daniel Bard, who kind of sort of came out of nowhere last year. It really drops off really hard. And so if you don't have one of those top guys, if you think about it, in a 15-team league, if there's only like 9 or 10 solid closers, then then people are going to start overpaying for the next guys. The key, I think, is not getting into sort of knowing who your targets are and not panicking if that closer run starts to hit. If that Bard, Barlow, Holmes tier, if those guys are gone, that's fine. You wait and you say, okay, I know, or at least I've convinced myself that I think, Jorge Lopez is going to close for Minnesota. Duran's going to be the high leverage guy. That will be my target, between him or Jose Leclerc or whoever. You just sort of, you map it out. You have your plan for the entire, for the entire draft. You kind of lay out where those closers are and then just pick your spots and not force it.
So let's talk catchers, which is the bulk of our show will be about catchers. Now, what we do here is on this show, we don't just say, who's our top 5 catchers? I mean, I'm not really interested in that because I can't really pick 5 catchers at one time, and all the other shows will review the top 5, top 10 catchers. You don't need that. What we want to do is we want to spot some undervalued players, as per ATC, obviously. And based on, ATC is saying the catcher's worth this, the market says this. Well, it looks like a bargain, but we don't take our ATC's word for it. We will then do a deep dive, right? We're using ATC to just bubble up to the top potential targets, and then we do a nice discussion about each to see whether we agree with it, whether we think there's more or less, and then we can really clear the air for some picks. So for catchers, before we get into the actual players, let's just set the stage with the player pool. I've noticed, Vlad, and tell me if you see this, that catcher is very, very rich, especially in the middle. For one catcher leagues, it's actually rich the whole way there. I mean, the top catcher of Real Muto, Perez, all the way down to some of the middle ones, Stevenson, Jansen, Rowley, Keibert Ruiz. Those are decent catchers. You don't have the drop off a cliff for one catcher leagues. As far as two catcher leagues, it does get crappy at the end, but there's just a nice, there's no cliffs. It's a nice slide the whole way down. So I kind of think that you can really pick your spots here. If you have favorites, you are more likely to get your favorites this year because a lot of the pricing is bunched together in the market and bunched together what I think in reality is. So to me, if you're in a one-catcher league, you almost can just wait and not pick any catcher and just get whatever the dollar catcher is or your last round pick is in the end. And if you're in a two-catcher league, a little bit deeper, 30 catchers, let's say a 15-team league, I would suggest almost saying you can get two catchers in the middle. Like, don't wait till the end. There's going to be some good value somewhere in the middle. You don't need a super elite. You don't need an elite catcher. You don't need a Varsho or Will Smith. You can take a couple of shots in the middle, but focus in the middle. You don't need to wait till the end. What do you feel is the player pool, Vlad?
Yeah, so my first article of the season of my new column, Gut Feelings, was specifically talking about the catcher market because it's something that obviously it's where a lot of people start, but because it's been there's been a lot of discussion and specifically to this season, the fact that there's an abundance of catchers in the first 10 rounds like we've never seen before in a very long time. So through the first 10 rounds of 15 teamers through 150 picks, there are 10 of them. Not even 10, 3, 6, 9. Yeah, there's like 11 guys that are viable or have an ADP in the top 150. And yeah, it would be nice to have one of those for sure. But there are so many ways. I mean, really, the strategy is you pick the right player. It really doesn't matter. But there has been a lot of discussion. Some people like to go heavy catcher. They like the second round JT or Real Muto. Other people like to punt extremely on the other end of things. I like to just kind of take what the draft gives me. Like I have my certain targets that I like. I like Wilson Contreras. I like the other Contreras, his brother. I like Sean Murphy, Alejandro Kirk, and they fall in the right place. And if it's the best pick for me at the time against the other alternatives, that's kind of who I'll take. And then I have my second catcher list. The Logan O'Hoppes, Bo Nailers of the world. That would be fine as my second catcher, even like a Joey Bart. But looking back at, for example, I did a little study of last year. I looked at the top teams who finished in the top overall of the main event and the OC, and just to kind of see what the, who these teams ended up with. And it was a mix, really. Bob Cramatola, who won the main event, he had Will Smith as one of his catchers. As we know, it was a top 100 pick, and then Nick Fortes was the second one. You see a lot of William Contreras teams, a lot of Christian Betancourt on a lot of teams, a lot of Jose Trivinos. Like it's really a mix. There's really no one size fits all approach, and I think that's the same thing once again this year. So you just sort of get comfortable with the targets that you like, that you want, but I would not go extreme and just spend 2 of my first 5 picks on catchers just because it's a scarce position or whatnot.
Yeah, I mean, it's just what you're seeing there basically is get the best bargain. See wherever the price dips the most, that's who you get. You don't have to reach for players if you have that kind of fluid catcher pool, catcher market, and that's what I'm seeing this year. All right, before we go into the undervalued catchers, it's time for the Injury Gurus Trivia of the Week.
So we're talking about catchers, and the first catcher we're going to talk about actually is, I had to say it right, I'm giving away the answer, is one of the answers for the trivia question. But this past year, can you name the top 1, 2, 3, 4 players who were hit by pitch the most last year? Can you name them?
Non-catchers?
Overall hitters, overall.
Oh, I know, because are you asking me or anyone?
Yes, asking both of you.
I know Ty France is one of them.
Yeah,
No.
France. No.
No.
Brandon Nimmo.
Nope.
No?
Come on. Another Met, though.
Alonso.
No. Getting hit? No.
Really?
Wait, how? Because I was doing I think it was
Mark
top 4.
Canha.
Mark Canha's one.
Oh, right. Yes.
Mark Canha. Andres Jimenez is up there. Anthony Rizzo is up there. And Wilson Contreras is up there. Wilson Contreras was hit 24 times last year, which is a crazy amount, and that plays into his OBP. If you're playing in an OBP league, Wilson Contreras, the lowest OPP he's ever had for his career was 339, and that was the 46th ranked player last year. So his OBP is very high. He had the lowest K rate of his career last year at 21, and he was a little unlucky. His BABIP was 270. He's going to be in a better lineup this year. His launch angle changed by almost a full 2 degrees from the 2 years prior, and he hit the same amount of home runs. He has a career high in hard hit balls according to StatCast. That's with an XVL over 95. I think he is a really good option at the price level that he's at, and I think you're not going to see any decline. And being on the Cardinals, they know how to manage their catchers. Vlad, what do you think of Wilson Contreras?
Before I do that, I do want to say when you look at Wilson Contreras wasn't qualified, officially by his at bats. So that's why I remember, because I was recently doing a study. I was incorporating hit by pitch into my
that's correct. I had to go to a different website to actually go see the total and not just the qualified players.
Yeah, and I was going to say Ty France, he's second behind Mark Canha since 2021. So it's Canha and Canha 55, France 48 since the beginning of 2001. And
Canha was hit 28 times last year.
Yep. I love Wilson Contreras. There's people concerned about moving from playing half his games in Wrigley to in St. Louis this season, and a little bit of a downgrade in ballpark. I think that'll balance out with the team around him, and him be a little more motivated. I kind of see him kind of jumping into that Yadi Molina role and really becoming a leader on this team and almost a better hitter. And so I like him very much. I think if he stays healthy for a full season, I think he might mess around and be the catcher 1 or 2 this year.
Yeah, I mean, ATC has him as roughly a $3 bargain in a 15 team. By the way, just to clear the air, we can't really talk about every single format, but when I call out dollar numbers, I'm talking about sort of an NFBC format, 15 team 5x5 standard league. He's $3 bargain, right? He's $3 over. He's an $18 player. Market is like a $15. He's going about pick 100, let's say, in the NFBC currently. I mean, Wilson Contreras, what I'm looking at is I'm looking at his risk metrics, and he has a very low intra-standard deviation. Intra-standard deviation looks at the 5x5 roto categories and says, how balanced is he? Well, he actually has 4 or 5 stolen bases a year. He's got a good average. He's got a lot of power for a catcher. Good run, good RBI metrics. So even if he's a little bit lower in one of them, he might even compensate by getting a little bit more in the other, and the risk of his overall value not coming to fruition is lower than other people who are one category guys. If you stumble in one category, well, that's the end of your value, and of course, it's the end of your team value. It goes kaput, right? So he's very stable, and he's a catcher. You usually don't get these stable catchers. Now, I only have him projected for about 445 at bats. He might actually get more than that. It's possible. Low 20s homers. The big thing I see with him, and I don't know if it's just a a figment from last year, but he lowered his strikeout rate. It was 29% in 2021. It was 21%. That's a huge drop for somebody over that period of time, over a full season, 400-plus at-bats. I don't know if that's a real gain, but if it is, he had a 270 BABIP last year. There could be batting average upside. Like I'm projecting him for 250. He could be a 260 player or so with that change in eye and that change in an unlucky BABIP. So I can actually see him going upwards, regression upwards. I kind of think it's a good buy, good solid buy. If you're at that spot, you don't have your catcher, why not? It's a perfect spot for him.
And one more thing, according to roster resources, Wilson Contreras is supposed to bat second in that lineup. That's a very good spot to bat in that lineup.
Yeah, second is fantastic anywhere.
We'll
so definitely.
See. Yeah, that'll be interesting. And I'm always very careful with the roster resource. And obviously, Mr. Martinez does a fantastic job with it. But just so much is going to change, right? Like a little bit of news will alter that a little bit. I think there's some whispers of a Lars Nootbaar trade, in fact. Possibly going after Pablo Lopez to that pitching staff because I know they want to get a solid arm in there. But there's just so many things that lineup can do as far as the batting order with possibly Tommy Edman at the top. Nootbaar could possibly be on top if he doesn't. If he sticks around with the team. Brendan Donovan, by the way, against righties was a really solid number 2 hitter ahead of Paul Goldschmidt. We can see him hitting there as well. But in general, if Contreras hits number 2, and you start seeing that in the beginning of spring training, you're going to see his ADP just soar up, and he's going to be up there in the Sal Perez range real quick.
Next catcher we have is Sean Murphy, who I also see about a $3 bargain. Sean Murphy, he went from Oakland to Atlanta. Now you look at that ballpark factors. That's a huge change from Oakland to Atlanta. And I don't know if, the market is shrewd, but you never know. Maybe people are not taking into account his home run totals from the last 3 years, 18, 17, and 19. I'm scaling 2020 to full season, so just under 20. But if you look at the ballpark change, it would now be over 20, 21, 22, 23. So that's a nice bonus. He had 537 at-bats. I don't know if you can count on that going into Atlanta, but Atlanta likes to play their catchers. They even give some DH at-bats in Atlanta. It's one of the best places if you're a catcher to get some spots. Darno, Contreras had a lot of at-bats for a DH last year, so maybe we see that at-bat spike again. If we do, he's a lock for value, right? But even at 470 at-bats, which I'm projecting, he's a very nice catcher value. And, similar to Contreras, some of the things I said really hold. He is somewhat spread out other than stolen bases. His strikeout rate, 20% last year. 20%. That's enormous for catchers. Very low risk of a bad batting average. Because you have a good eye and you don't strike out a lot, you're probably not going to have a big risk of going kablooey with your average. So it's lower risk. That's fantastic. And the lineup in Atlanta is tremendous. Whoever he's going to bat against, going to be batting afterwards. You have Acuna in that lineup. You have Albies in that lineup. You have Olsen in that lineup. He's going to get a lot more RBI opportunities and run-scoring opportunities than he did in Oakland. So a lot of stuff is going to just go up and up. I'm excited for Sean Murphy. I think he's very similar to Contreras being, one of the better catchers and of value. Do you agree, Vlad?
You said you have him, was that the 470 at-bats or plate appearances?
At-bats.
Okay,
about 50 walks, so 520 or so.
Yeah, so I'm in the same ballpark there. I've got 475 at-bats, 529 plate appearances, about a 9.5 walk rate. The one thing that I have higher than the projections that are out there right now, and possibly even yours, but I have him slightly higher with home runs. So I have him 24 on the season, and that's in slightly less plate appearances. So basically a more per at-bat average on the power. So I do think the power is going to play for him a little bit. I think he's kind of had that season coming for a long time, and I think it might come to fruition this season. And then you did mention the stark drop in his strikeout rate. He had been a 25, 27% strikeout guy over the course of his career, 20% last year, as you'd mentioned. But he'd always been a poor batting average guy. For a catcher, he's been decent. But in general, he's a 236 career hitter, and that's, about 1,200 plate appearances. I could see that, creep up a little bit. I don't think he'll necessarily be helpful in that category, but I don't think he's going to kill either. And as you mentioned, the plate appearances and just the fact that he's a good defensive catcher, and the fact that we saw William Contreras and Travis d'Arnaud together in that lineup a lot, with one of them DHing, I think plays well for both Murphy and d'Arnaud. And not to get sidetracked, I did just want to mention, because I've been doing a lot of drafts, I've noticed a huge drop on Travis d'Arnaud price since Murphy came on the team. And I think d'Arnaud at this point's going to end up becoming a solid value because, like we said, he'll probably get a fair share of plate appearances as well. And he's a good hitter when he's healthy.
Yeah, agree. Ruvain, anything to add?
Yeah, well, Sean Murphy is right now he's stable. He caught 112 games 2 years ago, 116 games last year. You mentioned the K rate. He had the second highest WAR as a catcher, only behind Real Muto. So he's really, really solid overall. The only thing that concerned me just a little bit was that his launch angle decreased a little bit, but his home run to fly ball went down accordingly, but it didn't really affect his overall numbers. So like you said, Ariel, if he's playing in a better ballpark, even with that decrease in launch angle, he still will get his home runs.
Yeah, his fly ball totals are going down, and the home run to fly ball, it looks actually a little bit unlucky low even. So maybe he'll hit a few less fly balls. ATC's projecting 21 homers. It's, a bit 3 less than you. But I definitely see the potential for more. He definitely is a value, for sure. Next up, Danny Jansen. Danny Jansen here, ATC has about a $2.50 bargain, $10.50 player going for about $8 in terms of market value. They've cleared a little bit of the air, Toronto getting rid of their prospect catcher, but they also then jammed the catcher trading for Dalton Varsho, although we think Dalton Varsho is going to not play catcher and play mostly outfield. Danny Jansen, very, very low parameter risk. His ATC metrics are actually very good. Negative skew, low intra-projectional risk with the categorical risk. So, there you go. He had 15 homers, 15 in only 215 at-bats. That's enormous. I'm projecting over 20 homers for him. And look at these strikeout walk metrics. 17.7 strikeout rate, 10% walk rate. Very good eye, and he walks a lot. So these are excellent metrics across the board. Seem to be coming in his own. The question is, how much playing time will he get? I don't think on the Blue Jays he's going to get any DH time because they just signed Belt, right? They also have to play, maybe Vlad Guerrero plays there a little bit. You're not gonna clog up there with them. So it's pretty much him or Kirk as the catcher. So I don't know if he'll get the actual plate totals to boost his value, but the per at bat stuff is excellent, and he's still a nice number one catcher. I'm not as thrilled with him as the other guys so far, but he's still okay. And of course, if his price drops even lower than this, then I think he's a reasonable bargain. Any thoughts on Danny Jansen, Vlad?
Oh, absolutely. I got a lot of thoughts on Danny Jansen, mostly because he's somebody I've been drafting since the very beginning. Just one of those guys that I've always kind of bought into and believed in because of his tremendous power. He was, I think, a pretty big pedigree as well, despite being a 16th round pick. He just really came on in the minors. But the problem with him had always been he was a massive batting average drain. He just really never got the plate appearances. It was just the year before the pandemic, 2019, showed a little promise. At a little bit over 100 games, he hit 13 home runs, but he hit like 210 basically. He's a career 220 guy. And part of the problem with last year's average is had he not got hurt, and I think it was a couple of times that he got hurt, he probably wouldn't have hit that high. That 260 that he hit was in 248 plate appearances. He's pretty much somebody you shouldn't rely on for batting average. It's mostly the power, as you're looking at, per at-bat power. Now, the concern with Jansen for me now, and the fact why I've reduced him in my projections previous to their release, was the Brandon Belt signing. And that really does sort of muck the waters there for them because Alejandro Kirk is, they're going to want to keep his bat in there a lot. I mean, obviously, he'll probably doing some DHing as well. But I just don't see the over 400 at bats basically for him. So, we're seeing 499 plate appearances from the bat. Steamer's got 425. I think I've got 390. So I'm considerably less. I could end up being very, very wrong. I do like him as a per bat player, but in general, I think I'm a little bit lower on Jansen than I would like to be after this Brandon Belt move.
Yeah, very thorough review there. I guess the value really changed after that the signing of Belt. I mean, there's nowhere to put him at DH. There's just do the math. There is nowhere to put him, and you never know. Dalton Varsho could end up catching some. Right, I see a big playing. It's funny how they traded their prospect away only to create a bigger crunch, and then they signed Belt. Very confusing what they're doing, but
I don't get it.
Well, actually, he's never had more than 384 plate appearances in his career. He's always been injured. He gets hurt, little nicks and dings. He's out for 2 weeks here, 2 weeks there, 2 weeks here, and it's a big problem. But according to Statcast, his hard hit rate when he's out there is 46%. And the last 2 years, he's been pulling the ball more. So if you pull the ball more with no shift out there, his batting average may not be as bad as people are saying it's going to be. Now, you mentioned Belt. Belt actually said earlier this month that he feels he's completely healthy. He had surgery on his right knee this past September, and he anticipates seeing most of his starts as the DH. So my concern is Danny Jansen, staying on the field either because of health or because of getting playing time. I think that's where he's going to get crunched the most.
yeah, interesting take. Definitely, I like the other catches we've said so far more than him. But again, if he's more like if you have him on your roster, he's going to be good. It's just more of a risk and what the price is. But the fact that they signed Belt, doesn't that drop Jansen's price in the market? Right? I mean, his value goes down, but his market price goes down.
It should, but then also I'm a huge Belt apologist, and am still gonna double down and go into him this year. And most likely, he probably will not be healthy again this year, so that would probably reopen opportunities for Jansen. But like Ruven said, Jansen's also very injury prone, so we'll see. Maybe we'll see Santiago Espinal or Spencer Horwitz grabbing the at-bats there at DH.
A lot of things to
One of
consider.
ours.
Yeah, a lot of things to consider with him, but there are all the arguments that we've laid out. We have a mailbag question from Mike Carter who asks, what do you guys make of Cal Raleigh? Believe the hype. Well, Cal Raleigh is on the list. I don't really see him as a big numeric value compared to market. He's going at par value, about a $10 player. He's going in the 11th round, but it's tough to beat that power. I mean, he's really the home run guy now. He's Mike Zunino in a good year, put it that way. He had 27 homers last year and just 370 at-bats. Could be more. You never know. In terms of just checking whether it makes sense, I always want to check, okay, that's what he did. Does it make sense? Fly ball rate, 55% last year. That's what it was close to in the minors. Home run fly ball rate, a little bit higher than it was in the minors. But the barrel rate, 15% that he had last year, really does support that. So, he's legitimate. I think his underlying metrics show. So I'm not concerned about his power. His average, well, he's a batting average risk. He's a 220 hitter. But, you take that with catchers. With some of these catchers, as long as you get one or two categories that are above, the RBIs will be high. I mean, Seattle will be decent. He should get somewhere in the 60s RBIs. Most projections have that as well. So, this is like a Gary Sanchez, Mike Zunino Goodyear type, which is very, very valuable. The ATC volatility risk, very low. He's got negative skew. He's got low interprojectional standard deviation. So low-risk guy, pretty much this is what he is. And if you have par value, you're getting a par value guy. I kind of think that for a two-catcher league, he is really a good anchor to start with, and then you can get somebody else that maybe fills in a little part of the your catcher values. I think in a shallow league, though, his cost might be high. You probably don't have to reach for him in a shallow league because you can replicate his production elsewhere, especially with another catcher. So I would say deep league, I'm interested. Shallow league, I'm not, but very stable. So I would definitely happy to have him on my roster, and I wouldn't worry about it. What are your thoughts on Cal Raleigh, Vlad?
So the one thing I was just curious because I hadn't dug into him, I think, since last, since kind of setting the projections, and I wanted to look back at his split stats just because I was curious. And of course, one season, just 400 PA, small sample, but really interesting. As probably you would imagine, 2/3 of his home runs last season came on the road. Obviously, his home park not necessarily great for power for production. He hit 180 at home with 9 of his 27 home runs, and he hit 244 on the road. And then as far as the splits, the power splits, 24 of his 27 home runs came against righties, which is interesting. Granted, 3 times the plate appearances, but still, it's 24-3 ratio there. Power righties to lefties.
Interesting. He is a switch hitter, right?
He is a switch hitter, yeah. And you've got what's his name? Tom Murphy is back. If he's healthy, might get some at bats against righties.
Interesting, yeah.
Also, Cal Rowley only had 3 hits through May 15th last year. So he started very, very slow. I remember he started taking off. He hit a home run against the Mets, and it killed the Mets. And that's when he just started taking off. That was a May 15th home run. He took off after that. And if you go even deeper for his stats, he had only 16% soft contact last year, which means when he hit the ball, he hit it pretty hard. So it's a matter of actually just making contact, because he did have a strikeout rate of 29% last year. So when he makes contact, I think, Ariel, you said he's a Mike Zunino. He is the exact Mike Zunino. If Mike Zunino he's Mike Zunino reincarnated. He came from Seattle. It's the exact same thing. I think if you are okay with that not so great batting average and get those 20, 25 home runs, he's the guy to take, and you can get him at a good price.
Yeah, Zunino in a good year, though.
Yes.
Zunino's had the crappy years. This is like Zunino in a good year, but I'm more sure of it. So
yes.
Absolutely. Okay, there you go. That's a guy to consider. Going all the way much lower, you mentioned him earlier, and to be honest, I really didn't know much about this guy until I bubbled up the ATC projections. Logan O'Hoppe on the Angels. I'll let you go first. Ruve, why don't you go first on him? What are your thoughts on the Angels catcher?
By the way, I did get confirmation, and I am sorry to interrupt. I was always calling him O'Hoppe because I never had heard his name, and then I listened to, I believe it was DVR and Eno, and I heard Eno keep saying O'Hoppe, and I was like, that doesn't sound right, but maybe it is. And I looked it up, so I guess it is O'Hoppe.
Well, you can. Let's say
sounds funnier.
Sloppy O'Hoppe, or you can put nicknames to O'Hoppe. It's a better name. It's a better name to broadcast and announce to. All right.
Well, he is the youngest guy on this list of catchers we mentioned. He's only 22, and he only had 16 plate appearances last year. And he did something that very few catchers do. They jumped from Double-A to the majors. That's not normal. So what I did was I actually looked at his minors last year. In the minors last year, he had 26 home runs and 7 stolen bases before being called up. This is a guy, if it's a 2-catcher league, I'm okay taking him because he has that upside. And just that alone, he's not going to be that expensive. Not many people are going to know too much about him because who's going to trust 16 plate appearances? But if you look at the minors, he does show promise of power there.
Yeah. Thoughts, Vlad?
He was the guy that came over in the Brandon Marsh deal.
Right.
Yeah, last August.
Yes.
It's going to be him, and it really depends on how he looks in camp and if he can sort of stick around. He's obviously a strong prospect. He's a good hitter. Decent plate patience, actually. Seems like a guy that may not necessarily hurt you in batting average. But, of course, rookie coming up might have some struggles. But, Max Stassi is still there, and Max Stassi was showing some promise in 2021, enough to, make him a solid 20th rounder as your second catcher last season. But then Stassi was hurt, and he stunk. He was essentially horrible. I think there's a little bit of bounce back in Stassi for this season. Not that he's going to be fantasy relevant or anything, but enough that he's decent defensively to sort of maybe mix in and just give, the O'Hoppe a little bit of trouble. But that's what I'm hoping for, especially drafting O'Hoppe, that he really kind of comes into his own and just kind of explodes as a rookie out the gate. That's what I would love to see, because he really does have the talent to show that off.
Well, I see this Stassi as a path to him playing more. I mean, Stassi had a 180 batting average last year. That's path to playing time. It really is. And if you want to, sort of Sean Murphy, the reason why he really was fantastic value-wise was because he came into a lot of at-bats. I can see a path to that with Logan O'Hoppe. And all they have to do is beat out Max Stassi. They don't have anybody else. So that's what I see as the upside with him. And good player per plate appearance. I mean, I'm projecting him for 10 homers and only 250 at-bats. Very, very decent. Very low volatility. And usually with rookies, you get a higher volatility, right? Projections are a little bit not sure what you're going to get. They're closer than for most rookies, especially most rookie catchers for him. So that makes me say, there's something here. You don't have to pay a lot for him. He's not for one catcher leagues. He's for two catcher leagues. But I kind of see, pick him up, see if he stumbles into playing time. You can always throw him away for another catcher if you want at that level. Kind of like him. He's growing on me here. So I think it's a thumbs up for me.
I'm in.
Sounds good. All right, let's do a couple of mailbag questions. We've gotten. Thanks, everybody, for sending in those ones. Okay, well, first question from Drew. Who is this year's Sean Murphy, the guy who ends up playing a lot more than we thought and gains extra roto value because of the extra playing time? Funny how that worked in the question. I mean, Hoppy is the guy for me. Anybody else that we're missing, Vlad or Ruvain?
We're talking about catcher specifically?
Catcher specifically who might have playing time upside, and that would really cause them to be a good value because they'll just gain value from plate appearances.
I'll tell you, I think Luis Campusano could be that guy because Austin Nola's, he's kind of on the wrong side of 30. He's got some injury history a little bit. Is an okay hitter. I guess a decent contact guy. But Campusano might actually get an opportunity and earn it. I mean, there's no Jorge Alfaro there anymore in the mix, so he has an opportunity to kind of maybe run with it. So I would at least that's what I would like to see happen. And possibly Nick Fortes too, right? I mean, a guy, one of the few catchers that can steal a few bases, pretty good plate, per plate appearance guy. But you still obviously got Jacob Stallings there, who's a pretty good defensive catcher.
Ruvain, anybody else to add?
Yeah, I got the guy that you mentioned earlier, William Contreras. I mean, he was blocked in Atlanta. They had to put him at DH. He's going to be the starting catcher in Milwaukee. I think his at-bats are going to go up, and I think his productivity is going to go up as well.
That's a good one. I'll throw is it Eric Haase or is it Haase, like Hoppy?
Haas. I think just Haas.
Haas. Eric Haas.
Eric
but I'm down
Haas. How about him? They have shown him, he had not a great year last year, or at least in the early going, he had some flashes of goodness last year, but they also sometimes play him in the outfield to give him extra at-bats in Detroit. I was on him for last year. His price is still somewhat cheapish, so I can see him stumbling onto more playing time as well.
Yes, and it's just a testament to how bad that Tigers lineup is too.
Oh,
the
sure.
fact that a sort of 30-year-old journeyman catcher is getting like prime at bats, but Haas I know very well because of DFS, and you just, there's a bad lefty on the mound, you play Eric Haas because he mashes left-handed pitchers for some power. So I like him in that regard, and then really there's nobody in his way. It's like, what, Donnie Sands?
No, there's nobody in his way, and they like him and they give him more playing time. I know we're picking on crappy situations. Well, that's how we make our money in fantasy baseball, by identifying bad situations where the guy stumbles onto more playing time. That's the whole name of the game. All right, next question from David. Does Kirk find his second half stride this season? Also, is there a Joey Bart breakout coming? Any thoughts, Vlad?
I like Joey Bart. I actually just drafted him in the 20th round as my second catcher in my latest draft champions. Of course, this guy that's probably going to be hitting near the bottom of the lineup. But I did like some stretches that I saw out of him. Obviously, big prospect, good pedigree. It's never obviously going to be the Buster Posey that some unfairly compared him to, even in the slightest. I don't think anyone said, he's going to be the next Posey. But I think there were some Posey-esque skills that they thought with him. I don't think he'll ever be that. But I think he could kind of take it to the next level, hit for some power or surprise with 18-plus home runs. And then the other part of that was Alejandro Kirk. Alejandro Kirk is just, I think, one of the best contact hitters in baseball, and I love him, and I think he probably takes it to another level this year. I think anything's possible with him. I
agree. Anything to add, Ruben?
Yeah, I agree about the Alejandro Kirk and about Joey Bart. His K rate last year, he had a 38.5 K rate, and his BABIP was 326, and he still batted only 215. It's hard to see. I mean, he was sent back down to the minors to try to get his head on straight, but I mean, he is a prospect. He's only, still, I guess you can call him a prospect still. He was a top prospect. He's only 26. Catchers usually hit their stride around 28 to 29. I mean, look at Travis d'Arnaud. He was with the Mets. He never really hit a stride until he left New York. It may take a change of scenery to help Joey Bart, but I think he will get it, but I don't think it's going to be this year.
All right. Well, we have a bunch of other questions, more pitcher questions. So we're sort of running late. We'll either put him next show or even on the pitcher shows we do. But I do want to get to Ruvain's injury report. What do you got for us this first week of our draft prep season, Ruvain?
Okay, I got a couple of people. First, we'll start with Chris Bryant. Chris Bryant said this week that he'll enter spring training healthy and with no restrictions. He's coming off of plantar fasciitis last year, that foot injury that really destroyed his whole season. If you want to go after him, he may be a bargain because people may be scared. They'll think, oh, Chris Bryant's an injury risk. I see he's playing in the same stadium he was playing last year, and people were high on him before he got hurt, so I don't know why people shouldn't go after him now. Kyle Hendricks says his shoulder, which he strained last July, feels quote-unquote amazing, but his availability for opening day remains up in the air, so I'd probably stay away from that. And Frankie Montas, he's battling shoulder inflammation. He is expected to miss the first month of the season. Who's going to take his place? That's an excellent question because no one knows yet.
Yeah, Montas, I don't know, some of these pitchers that the Yankees have gotten recently in the trade deadline just didn't work out. Sonny Gray didn't work out. And going back to Hendricks, what in the world does that mean? Oh, my shoulder feels amazing. I just can't pitch. What does that mean?
It basically means he's not going to start the season on the IL. That's what it means, according to him. But, he's getting older, and I don't know how much fantasy value he has anymore.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing with Hendricks is that it was the pinpoint control that did it for him. And once you lose some of that with age or whatever, and you don't have that pinpoint control, I mean, he doesn't have much else. So I loved him for years and years and years. I was always the advocate. Get Kyle Hendricks. He'll save your whip. He'll save your ERA. Who cares about strikeouts? You'll get them otherwhere, but you can't. He has a skill that no one else can have. But that skill is clearly gone. How many teams will Kyle Hendricks be on your roster, Vlad?
It's going to be 0. I'm not a Hendricks guy, and I hope he doesn't listen to your podcast. Although I know Matt Mervis and Vinny Pasquantino do.
That's right. We had Vinny Pasquantino, and we had Matt Mervis. Oh, man. I feel so bad for Matt Mervis because after we did that show, well, we knew that Hosmer was on the roster, and then they signed Trey Mancini. I'm like, oh, my God. What are they doing to this kid?
And you're talking to somebody who has been drafting a lot of Matt Mervis, and this is even after Arizona Fall League when everybody was going gaga over him, and I'm like, I'm not going to spend a high pick on Matt Mervis. And then I started kind of looking into him, got into it, and I started drafting him. But you know what? You know how it is. You know how it goes. Cream rises to the top. If it's meant to be, I think everything I kind of see and feel about this kid, I think you guys probably feel the same thing. I think he's going to be a sort of a star in the making, and I think he can kind of break out right off the bat this season.
And one of the guys you mentioned was Eric Hosmer. Eric Hosmer lost his job last year. So Hosmer's not a lock to be there the entire season. Yeah. He's not a lock to be there through May. So, there's still a path of playing time. And if the Cubs jump out early and start doing well really early and Hosmer's not producing, he's going to be gone.
Yeah, well, I mean, Mancini could be a guy to trade. Who know, build up his value, trade. You never know. But I was going to ask you, Vlad. Do you think that's a buying opportunity on Mervis? Because obviously his price is going to plummet, and if you think that he's still going to come up and he can still DH or you can play first base and you can have Mancini in the outfield for all you know, is this now a buying opportunity or is this? I don't know if the value is worth it. Certainly in the NFBC where you have to roster players and there's not a lot of room, maybe just not for this year. Well, what are your thoughts on Mervis?
Yes, I think it's an opportunity where if he starts to go drop beyond, which looks like is happening now, beyond pick 300, which is 20th round, 21st round borderline of 15 teamers, he starts to fall beyond that, and you're looking at the alternatives in that area, guys without complete full playing time, guys like Nick Gordon, Luis Rengifo, Eric Haas, like these are the type of guys in his range and his price point now. And there's more upside with him. That's a type of shot, right? That I think is worth taking.
Right.
And, it depends on the format too. If it's a 12-teamer, obviously you're not going to hold a Matt Mervis if he starts the year off in the minors. But I think if I'm drafting, early or like a draft and hold and he falls far enough, I'm taking a shot now and just hoping I, get something. Because I feel like at some point this year, even if it's not from the beginning of the year, at some point, a talent like him, guy that's hungry, motivated, talented, is going to win out over a bum like, Eric Hosmer, who I also hope doesn't listen to this pod.
Yeah. I hope he does. But yeah, definitely. And if you want to check out those interviews with Mervis and with Pasquantino, we just did them last week. Check them out. All right. Well, That's all the time we have time for this week. But before we let you go, Vlad, why don't you just tell everybody where we can see all your stuff, we can hear you, listen to you, and read all your fabulous work. Why don't you kick it off?
Yes, on Twitter at RotoGut, and then all of our content this season, including my VDP projections and articles, Fab column during the season, which I think everyone should have access to, is at ftnfantasy.com. So thank you guys so much for having me on. It's always a pleasure. It's a nice way to kind of sort of kick off my podcasting, go here in the preseason, and always a pleasure. And happy early ATC day to all who celebrate, which should be everyone.
Yeah, there we go. All right, Ruven, quickly, what do you got going on?
You can follow me on Twitter at MLB Injury Guru, where I'm going to tweet out injury updates as they come in, and they should be coming in within the next month or so when pitchers and catchers start to report to spring training. You can also follow my weekly in-season article on Roto-Bowler that comes out usually over the weekend to help you with your fab pickups.
All right, I'm Ariel Cohen. Twitter is ATCNY, only 5 letters. Amazing. And you can read my work over at Fangraphs, over at Roto-Bowler. Projections, ATC projections will be on Roto-Bowler, on Fangraphs, and on CBS Sportsline. And a nice nice Google Doc sheet on that site as well. So check them out. Use them, and let me know if you find anything. Let me know you might have seen something that I didn't. A good player, a bad player, question. Maybe there's a naming issue. You never know. I got to match all these players. Sometimes a player can come out wrong. Who knows? Let me know what you see and enjoy them. All right. Once again, thanks so much, Vlad Sedler, for coming on the show, and from all of us here at Beat the Shift. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Beat the Shift podcast presented by Fangraphs. Follow us on Twitter at beat_shift_pod.